Larissa and I will be discussing how to do a critical appraisal of an article on a diagnostic test. This mathematician once said, "It is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything on insufficient evidence." Said proponent is William Kington Clifford, a British mathematician and philosopher who invented, or actually is a proponent of Clifford algebra. So basically, specifically in healthcare sciences, evidence-based medicine is of high importance because it allows us to make well-informed decisions that will benefit our patients. In mind, for this session, our learning objectives are as follows. You should be able to apply the rules of evidence in evaluating validity of the results of an article on diagnostic tests while understanding the rationale for the various points in the critical appraisal tool. We will also review so you can understand and calculate for the measures in which we test for the validity of the results of an article, such as your sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value, negative predictive value, the likelihood ratios, pretest probability, post-test probability, and the pretest and post-test odds. So we will be reviewing some concepts as well as look into some new concepts that you will be able to use in critically appraising an article. If you recall your lecture last year with Dr. Kalimag on evidence-based medicine, this is the EBM cycle, in which we initially ask a clinical question, we acquire literature or evidence to seek answers for it, we appraise existing data, and then we apply and act for the benefit of our patients. Why do we perform diagnostic tests? What is their use? So first and foremost is to diagnose whether a specific condition is present. It also helps us plan our therapy or intervention. So it basically guides our management whether or not we need hospitalization, we need certain drugs, or we can employ other means. It's also used to monitor response to treatment. Like for example, in sepsis, some inflammatory markers can help indicate whether or not we are using the right antibiotics, or if the clinical response is vague, we can use certain markers like your CRP to indicate whether or not the patient's condition is getting worse or better. It also helps us calculate the risk of future events in prognosticating cases for patients, and also to definitely gauge the prognosis of our patients diagnosed with a certain disease. This would tell us different steps or different components in our praising an article on diagnosis. For the purposes of this lecture, we will be focusing on the following. First is how to appraise directness, whether or not the article answers your specific clinical question. Next, we'll appraise the validity of the results of your article, as well as look into the results. We will also learn actually how to assess the applicability of these results and individualize the results based on the need in your clinical scenarios. Next is how do we share or how do we utilize the results or your appraisal in real life situations. Using directness. So does a study provide a direct answer? So when we look into directness, we look at whether or not the study provides a direct enough answer to your clinical question in terms of the PEO or the PECO. But first, what is your PEO and what is PECO? Let's look into it again. So every research or everything starts with a clinical question. And the components are first your population in which a test might be done, the exposure, the examination to be done, also called the index test, and the comparator, which is your reference standard. So this is usually the test by which we compare your exposure or the index test. This is usually a test that is widely accepted and has been highly validated prior to your article. And next, or last but not the least, is your outcome, which is the condition that the test is supposed to diagnose. Now, some points to consider that may impact directness. First is the study design used. So this is what we're emphasizing to you during your research proposal creation days, in which your study design should be appropriate to your objectives or your clinical question or your research problem. Next is the setting of patients. So whether or not it's in the hospital or outpatient, it should be appropriate in answering the clinical question being posted or being answered. Next is your methodologies, the kits or the equipment that you're going to use to answer your clinical question. And lastly, the specific diagnosis and not the entire disease spectrum. So basically, we want to know if it answers the diagnosis and not necessarily the entirety of the disease spectrum. So it has to be very specific. Now here is a table that you can use to check whether or not the article is able to pass the criteria of directness. So first you plot the PECO of your research article and then compare it to a clinical scenario. So when we say the clinical scenario, how you intend to apply the results. Next up is appraising validity. So how do you know that the results are valid? So in appraising validity, there are four recommended criteria. It's basically questions answerable by yes or no, with more yeses being better, making the study more valid. So first question is, was the reference standard an acceptable one? Recall that in your PECO, you have your index test and your C, which is your comparator, the reference standard. So you should make sure that it is an acceptable one by ensuring that first, the index test is comparable against it, although taking note that perfectly accurate tests are very rare. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the reference standard you're using is the most accurate one. Since basically reference standards may vary. It can be clinical, meaning the response time could be based on histopathology, criteria, or response to treatment. Other points to consider is that the reference standard may be chosen in many ways based on feasibility, consensus statements such as your guidelines, or society agreements. It must define the disease in a way that is acceptable to most medical practitioners. Next question is, was the definition of the index test and the reference standard independent? The two tests must not overlap. So that index test or its criteria must not be part of the criteria of the reference standard. This is to avoid a falsely high level of agreement, which leads to an overestimation of the accuracy of your index test. So you should ask, did the results of the test influence the decision to perform the reference standard? If yes, then it might not be independent. You should check that the index test is done and its result becomes the indication for doing the reference standard, which is not ideal. If so, if the index test is being done before the reference standard, then the agreements between the tests will increase. Okay? And then they cannot be independent of each other. Now, your interpretation of the index test and the reference standard should be independent. So here, this is where your blinding also comes in. So knowledge of the results of the earlier index test may influence the interpretation of the reference standard or vice versa. This will make your index test or case seem better than it is. So the interpretation of your results may be skewed. Next is, how do we check or evaluate the results? Now this is the meat of your appraisal. So we need to review certain calculations and definitions, specifically your likelihood ratio. So here in appraising the results, you have to ask what were the likelihood ratios of the various test results. So to review, likelihood ratio is a likelihood that the given test result would be expected in a patient with a target disorder compared to the likelihood that the same result would be expected in the patient without the target disorder. It is a measure of how much the likelihood of the disease changes given the test result. It is used to diagnose how good the diagnostic test is and helps in selecting the appropriate diagnostic test for different disorders. It is less likely to change with the prevalence of the disorder, and it can be calculated for several levels of the test, meaning tests with more than two results, not just positive negative. It is used to calculate post-test probability in a given individual. So here we see the interpretation of the different likelihood ratios. So if you get a likelihood ratio that is close to or equal to 1, it means there's no change in the likelihood of the test. So it means that your test is not so good. But if it's more than 1, it increases in the likelihood of disease, making it more specific, while it's less than or farther from 0, it decreases in likelihood of this disease. Interpreting the likelihood ratio is that the farther it is from 1, on the more positive side, meaning it's more than 1, makes the test actually a good screening test. Whereas if it's farther than 1 or more, less than 1, it is often a good confirmatory test. Now, it can also be looked at this way, in which an LR greater than 1 produces a post-test probability higher than the pretest probability, while an LR less than 1 produces a post-test probability lower than the pretest probability. Now, what are the other measures that we can apply in appraising the validity of your results? All right. So first, you have your sensitivity and specificity. So you're all familiar with this. Just to review, so conceptually, sensitivity is the ability of the test to label as positive those who truly have the disease, while mathematically, it's the proportion of tests positive among all those with disease. In contrast, specificity is the ability of the test to label as negative those who do not have disease, and it is a mathematical proportion of tests negative among all those without disease. If you recall, we introduced the mnemonics, which is your snout and spin, with snout being that a highly sensitive test with a negative result is good at ruling out a disease, while a highly specific test with positive results is good at ruling in the disease. We also have your positive predictive value, which is the probability that one has a disease if the test is positive, and your negative predictive value, which is the probability that one does not have disease if the test is negative. If you recall your 2 by 2 table, these are again your beloved formulas. Okay, so keep this in mind. Save this on your phone. And now, if we apply the 2 by 2 table to appraising results in the diagnostic test, you put the index test result in the x-axis, while the truth as diagnosed by the reference standard is in the y-axis, so above, so that you don't have a mistake in creating your 2 by 2 table. And then the formulas are as follows, so it's the same. Okay, so again, save this in your phone. Now, what is the connection to the LR? So if you look at the definition of your likelihood, the positive likelihood ratio is the probability that the test is positive in diseased persons over the probability that the test is positive in non-diseased persons, or your sensitivity over 1 minus specificity. Okay? Now, your negative likelihood ratio naman, on the other hand, is the probability that the test is negative in diseased persons over the probability that the test is negative in non-diseased persons, or your 1 minus sensitivity over specificity. Now, if you're confused, I present to you some tables here to simplify all the measures. So when we say 1 minus sensitivity, that's also your false negative rate. And when we say your 1 minus specificity, that is your false positive rate. And the formulas are here. So you can just plug and play in your 2 by 2 table. Okay. We also have what is called your Bayes theorem, which we will be discussing later. And again, your likelihood ratio of a negative test result and your likelihood ratio of a positive result, or your LR positive and your LR negative. Okay. Now, what is the clinical relevance of these values? So basically, the sensitivity and specificity tells you the accuracy of the test, while your PPV and NPV estimate the probability of disease given a test result. Take note, though, that these measures, sensitivity, specificity, positive predictive value, and negative predictive value, can only be applied on tests with two results, meaning those who have positive, negative, yes, no, disease, non-disease. But what if your tests have more than two? This is where your likelihood ratio comes in. So as discussed earlier, it allows for the intermediate results across a range of values. So more than two. So in tests where there is suspicious, indeterminate, are likely. And it is presented in a 2 by n table, meaning the n is the number of possible results. So this is how you plot it. All right. So how do you compute? So first, you have your positive LR, or the number of times that the probability of disease is increased given a positive result, and the formula is as such. So A over A plus C plus E all over B divided by B plus D plus F. Now, how about your suspicious LR? So you just go down. So your suspicious, or your second or the middle option, is the number of times that the probability of disease increased given a suspicious result, or a third result, which is here. If you plot it on your 2 by n table, this is the formula. And lastly, your negative LR, which is the number of times that the probability of disease is increased given a negative result, which is, and here is the formula. Next is, how do we assess the applicability of your results? So how do we apply, or can we apply the results to a real world setting? We check certain components as summarized in the mnemonic scraps. So first is your sex. So of course, the biologic, physiologic, and hormonal differences between male and female can affect the validity or the applicability of your results. So if your study was done purely on females, you have to check whether or not the results can also be applied to males. Next is comorbidities. So the presence of comorbidities, whether in your clinical scenario or in the article itself, might affect the performance of the index test. So, for example, if you're going to apply a certain test on patients with a lot of comorbidities, specifically adults, it might affect the performance of the test. So you will find that the results of the article don't necessarily jive with your actual experience. Race, of course, is an issue when it comes to applicability. In certain cases wherein certain test results are highly or are more sensitive in certain racial profiles than others. Now, age is, of course, another component that you should look into. Of course, some tests may be more sensitive or may affect more certain age groups, or are more applicable to certain age groups. For example, a chest x-ray specifically for diagnosing pneumonia will be more telling, if that is the word, than in pediatric patients. So by experience, a lot of our pediatric patients with pneumonia have essentially or visually normal results, no? But they still are clinically diagnosed with pneumonia. Letter P stands for pathology. So this is not the subject, but how certain disease processes can affect the results of your tests. So for example, your CRP or your inflammatory markers when taken, for example, in a newborn at a certain stage, like for example, it's earlier than 12 hours or 24 hours, it may reflect poorly on the actual state of your patient because you might be getting maternal levels. So, certain pathologic or certain physiologic processes may come into play. And last but not the least, your other S, which is your socioeconomic status. So certain socioeconomic factors may affect the performance of your index tests. Indirectly, an example of this would be, for example, if your patient is below the poverty line, so is malnourished. So some tests, like for example, your PPD test may be affected. Okay. Next is individualizing results. So basically, the question being answered here is, can we use the test on our patient? So when you appraise an article, you're basically aiming to apply it on your patient. So now, after looking at the other components, can we essentially apply this on your patient? What impact does the test have on the patient's probability of having the disease? So here we look at your conceptual thresholds first. So first is your therapeutic threshold, or your treatment threshold, which is the probability above which we are reasonably sure, that we should stop testing and just treat. Next is your diagnostic or test threshold, which is the probability below which we should stop testing and just reassure the patient. And of course, your testing rate, where the clinician is unsure, so more testing is required. So basically, these are thresholds that you set for yourself, wherein you determine whether or not you treat the patient and stop testing, or your diagnostic threshold below which you should stop testing and just reassure the patient. Okay. So what comes in here is your pre-test and your post-test probability. Now, in determining your post-test probability, one tool you can use is your Bayes normogram. Okay, so the normogram showing the Bayes theorem is produced by Dr. Terence Fagan in 1975, and it's linked by a line that connects the pretest probability and likelihood ratio. So let's try. So this is your normogram. It's basically, you connect the three columns using a line that passes through the pretest probability, which is this column here, and your likelihood ratio, which is in the middle. So basically, you want to determine your post-test probability. So using the following, we have a pretest probability, let's say, of 3.3%, and an LR, positive LR of 0.7. We draw a line connecting the two, so it's straight. So this is just a rough estimate, not so exact, okay? So this is a rough estimate, so we see the post-test probability falls in this area. Now for the LR negative, we have again the pretest probability of 3.3 and LR of 2.36, which is here in this line. So we see that the post-test probability falls in this range, which is between 5 to 10. Okay? Now, what if you don't have the normogram? How do you look at the post-test probability? Now, this is how you compute for it. So, using the values earlier, so you have the pretest probability, so it's expressed as your percentage. You convert it to odds. So, this is your formula. So, this is what you call your pretest odds. So, your probability over 100 minus probability. So, you get your pretest odds. So, in this example, it's 0.03. Next, you get this result and you multiply it by the LR of the test result to get the post-test odds. So given the values earlier of 0.7 and 2.36, the formula is pre-test odds times LR. So you just get the value we got in number 2 and you multiply it to the LRs. So you get an LR positive, which is 0.0021, and an LR negative of 0.07. Those are the post-test odds for those particular likelihood ratios. Next, you convert the post-test odds to post-test probability in percent. So how do you convert that? So you do sort of like what you did in number 1, but slightly different. So you get the odds that you computed in number 3 over 1 plus odds times 100. So you plug it in. For your LR positive, you get 0.21% here. And then for your LR negative, you get 6.54%. Now, when we look at your normogram, the one we computed earlier, given the values, you see that it more or less falls in that area. So we see that our computation jives, or it's actually congruent with how we plot it in the normogram. Similarly, when we plot LR negative, we see that it also jives with our computed values. Okay? Next, or second to the last step, is sharing the decision or how to apply the results. Some factors to consider is you setting the diagnostic threshold. So first you have your perceived burden. So the worse or the more fatal the disease is, the lower the diagnostic threshold, meaning you have to test as much as possible. Next factor to consider is the invasiveness of the test. So the more invasive it is, your diagnostic threshold should be higher. So meaning, considering that it is a test that is negative, you have to consider a higher threshold, meaning you have to test less. You also consider the test side effects. Of course, if the adverse effects are or the risk outweighs the benefit, of course, your threshold should be higher, meaning you test less. And of course, the cost of the test, if it's very expensive, of course, your threshold should be higher. Now, conversely, we also set the therapeutic threshold, or when do we treat. So the factors are basically the same. So the perceived burden, so the worse the disease is, the lower your therapeutic threshold. So less testing, more treatment, because your patient might suffer. Invasiveness of the treatment, if it's more invasive, maybe you should opt to treat. Sorry. If the more invasive the treatment, the lower your therapeutic threshold. So maybe you should test first, or make sure that your tests are more accurate first before you give the treatment. Now, you also have to consider the treatment side effects. So when there are more side effects, or meaning that the patient may suffer more during the treatment, you have to ensure that your testing is correct, because as we mentioned earlier, so some treatment modalities may require more testing. So if the side effects are worse or graver, you may want to consider further testing before you initiate the treatment. And of course, your treatment cost. So if the treatment is very expensive, you have to consider that uh, your testing should be more accurate, so that you will not make your patient suffer by incurring non-essential costs. So in summary, when answering a clinical question or when you're addressing a clinical scenario, the first step is to search for literature. You search for an article that could possibly answer your clinical scenario. Then you appraise it carefully and understand how to interpret the results. Now, you should be able to gauge then if the certain information is applicable to your setting or not. If not, you go back to number 1. You search for more literature. And then finally, when you're confident in your results and your appraisal, you make a clinical call and decide with patients and their families. So it's important to work with your patients and their families. It's not just you deciding by critical appraisal alone. So you should involve the patients and their families. Okay, so just to share the CEBM diagnostic accuracy study. So this is how you evaluate. This is more or less the same as what was presented, but in a different manner. Okay, the questions may be differently stated, but basically This is the same manner or procedure of critically appraising an article. So when you go online, actually, you see different ways to critically appraise articles, specifically on diagnostic tests, but the essence is the same. Okay, so this is the other parts. So these are my references. And just to acknowledge the previous lectures of my fellow faculty, Dr. Adimla, Dr. Akat Dukili, Sir RJ, Doc Tech, Doc Ayla, and Doc Ronnie, who contributed to this lecture. So thank you very much for your kind attention. We will discuss further during the synchronous session, but please, if you have any questions after viewing this video, please do not hesitate to email me or message in Canvas, and please scan the QR code or click the link for the evaluation form for this lecture. So thank you very much and have a good day.